Chris Campbell, welcome to the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast. Honored to have you.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'm excited. Let's start. It's June of your senior year. You just graduated high school. How did you end up in Iowa City that summer?
Well, that's a bit of a convoluted story. I had been accepted into the University of Maryland, and therefore I told a school, Montclair State, that I wasn't going there. There was a guy, assistant coach Richie Softman, said, "Well, if you're not going here, I can't let you go to Maryland because you got too much talent. You can't wait. You can't waste it. I'm going to call up Gable and see if we can get you at the University of Iowa." I believed him, actually. So it's one of those things, guy tells you to do it. So I believed him. I had a car. I sold it, got a plane ticket out to Iowa, and I got a job at a factory. Kurt O'Meara helped me get the job, the head coach at the factory. So I had a job at a factory, and I was cleaning off car parts in the mornings and afternoons, and then going in the later evenings to wrestle with people like Gable and so forth. I'm ready for the national championships, the junior nationals.
So when you flew up, when you sold your car and bought the plane ticket, had you ever talked to Gable, or this is all just on a whim? You're hoping it works out when you get there.
The odd thing was that Gable had came to my school sports dinner. Apparently, Bump Elliott, who was the AD at the time, had a close relationship. I don't know if it was with Coach Gary Keller, my high school coach, or whoever, said that Gable had to go. Gable apparently was really pissed off that he had to go. So I met him there, but I had no idea at that time that I was going to be going to Iowa.
And let's not forget, Dan Gable's not even the head coach at this time.
Yeah, I mean, he's not the head coach, but Kurt O'Meara obviously was a genius, but Gable was fucking Dan Gable. I'm sorry, the language.
No, you could swear. You could swear. So you get out there, and as you said, no scholarship, nothing, and you're still getting ready for what's now known as Fargo. Back then, it was the Junior Nationals hosted out of Iowa City, and you wrestle none other than Mark Johnson in the finals.
That's right, and I know that the University of Iowa was heavily recruiting Mark Johnson to come there, and they were disappointed that he didn't come. But I think Kurt O'Meara was relieved because I think our score was 1-0, and the only point he got with me when I stepped out of bounds and pushed out of bounds. So.
And what was it like kind of getting settled in Iowa, your first couple months there, transitioning into your freshman year?
Well, that was tough because I was really homesick. Miss my mom, miss Westfield, New Jersey quite a bit. So I think the hardest part for me was just being homesick. The wrestling, I was just stunned and amazed at what I considered wrestling genius that was all around me. I was just in this incubator that was the most amazing thing for a person who was talented in the sport of wrestling.
And what kind of influence did J-Rob have on the technique at the time?
Well, Jay Robinson actually took me under his wing and went over a whole host of techniques and strategies for wrestling. So, I mean, with respect to my style, I think you could say that Jay was sort of the basically created my style for me after high school.
And it's just crazy to think about because you always hear in the 80s, Gable was the guy running it. J-Rob was a technique guy. Then later Zaleski maybe filled that role when J-Rob left. But, in the early 70s, again, Gable was an assistant. Everyone kind of knew he was going to be the head coach, but then J-Rob's in there as well. It's like, this room is just crazy. And who were some of your workout partners?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, John and Ben Peterson would come by every now and then when they were getting ready to prepare for the Olympics, and I think it was 76. Also in 73, I would run into them quite a bit. Obviously, Gable was a wrestling partner.
Really?
Jay was, Gable would beat me up. If he thought that you were sort of not trying your hardest in any particular day, the next day you'd be wrestling with him, and that was not a good day.
And what was like the structure of the practice back then?
We would do various things. And obviously, Jay was really sort of focused on technique. I mean, and Gable couldn't care less about technique. So, I would be working with Jay Robinson, walking through my moves slowly to make sure that my head position and arm positions, everything was in the right place. And then when wrestling party started, Gable would be pulling you, grabbing you, making you tired, and pulling you back on the mat to try and get you to wrestle when you say, no, I'm tired, because he won't let you. So.
And were you guys doing twice a day practices back then, like technique sessions in the morning, or did that start later?
Well, we always did technique sessions in the morning, but it was probably trying to think when we started to really pick it up, maybe 2 or 3 months before the national championships. We didn't do it like at the beginning of the year, I don't think. I don't really remember, to tell you the truth. It's kind of interesting you talking to me, because the guys that are wrestling now, their parents weren't even born when I was wrestling. That's the crazy thing about it.
It is crazy to think about. And then, you fast forward to 1992, and that's now a generation. So I graduated high school in 2007. I wasn't old enough to watch the 92 Olympic Games and remember it, but those stories from Barcelona were just kind of at the end of my era, and you heard about how tough that team was. And then obviously 96 was definitely something you heard about. But I mean, you're talking about your career spanned that whole gamut. I mean, one of the biggest, golden eras for American wrestling, 72 Olympics. That's the modern era, in my opinion. That changed everything. And then after that, there was a real strong period in American freestyle wrestling, especially in that late 80s period.
Yeah, I think our 92 team was, well, first of all, the 1980 team that I made, that Jimmy Carter boycotted, that would have rivaled the 72 Olympic team. And me and Lee Kemp certainly had shots at winning a gold medal, and we would have been the first 2 African Americans to win a gold medal in the Olympics. But all that was destroyed because of Carter.
How'd you find that out? Like, where were you at when you found that news out?
I had just made the Olympic team, won the trials, and I was in Iowa State, I think inside or outside of my house, and then I heard that it was official. Then I took a stick and started beating the tree to death. Yeah.
Man, because I read an old Sports Illustrated article where you said at the 80 trials, you beat Lieberman and you beat Peterson, and you were in some kind of like special zone where, really that weekend. What do you remember from that feeling in that zone?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I had been sort of not serious about wrestling and partying a little bit in Iowa City. Then I moved up to Iowa State, and when I moved up to Iowa State, they paid me as a coach. Then I got really serious in wrestling and really serious training. So I had trained, I'd done all the things: yoga, stretching, running, weightlifting, technique, meditation, all of that stuff. I was doing it. And, I was doing it because I was pissed off, because when I was in the national championships, I think in 79, whatever, I can remember wrestling Lieberman, and the mat judge blew the whistle to stop the match. So I stopped wrestling, and Lieberman jumped on me, threw me to my back, and then the 2 side judges called me pinned. Then the mat judge went up to the side judge and says, well, he can't be pinned because I blew the whistle to stop the match. And they said, oh, so we're sorry, he's pinned, he's done. So I had got some stolen calls that I felt were unreasonable. So I was of the opinion that, I can either quit because I think this is unfair, or I can just beat the hell out of everybody I wrestled. And so I decided to beat the hell out of everybody I wrestled. And I mean, I beat him. I think Lieberman was like 23-8 or 23-6. And I was on my last stalling call. In fact, in the first period, it was 11-3. And at that time, you got 3 stalling calls. They were going to caution me out. I was beating them 11-3 or something to that effect. And then the head referee had to come down and said, oh, no, he scored over 10 points, so he gets an extra caution. So anyway, the end of those sort of situations really pursued me to be the best. And I knew that nobody was going to beat me. It wasn't even a question.
That's special to get to that place. And I got to imagine, to get there, that the training you put in must have been just arduous. And in that same article, it said you were doing like 7 hours a day training. Do you remember kind of what your regiment was back in those days?
Yeah, well, obviously I was drilling in the morning, an hour and a half. I was either running or weightlifting, an hour and a half. And then at practice, I was, wrestling two and a half hours, and then watching films in the evening. And picked up a lot of good stuff from watching films. What's the guy's name? Oganishin. Some of the stuff he was doing, I picked up. My lift, I think it was.
So you were
Was it
just
Oganishin? I forget who it was.
you were just totally all in at that point on the Olympic dream, like
Oh
no
yeah,
distractions.
oh yeah. That was everything to me. There was nothing else that mattered.
And then amazingly, that in 81, right after the heartbreak of 80, you win your first world title. What do you remember from that experience?
Well, I can remember that I wasn't as sharp as I was in 80 because the boycott had really emotionally diminished my drive for training. It really was heartbreaking. So I wasn't at the best I was at, like say in 1980, but I was good enough, obviously, to win the world championships. And I was thrilled to win the world championships. I think they get more significant to me as I get older because I only won one for one thing, but it does mean at the end of the day I was the best in the world. I mean, and that's nice to say.
That's crazy. And but to your point, 6 months, 8 months before that, you had lost your drive to train. I mean, for folks who are out there now struggling with some depression or anxiety or whatever, like what advice would you give them to get out of that rut that you were in those months after that cancellation?
Boy, I don't think I'm qualified to give anybody advice. I mean, my whole thought would be, toughen up, get over it, and get to work. Forget about whining and just do it, because either you do it or you don't. That's life.
Wow. How did you ended up kind of stepping away in the mid 80s to pursue a career in law school? I mean, what went into that decision?
Well, I having not made the Olympic team, I realized that the chances of me being what I wanted to do my whole life, only thing I ever wanted to do was be a head wrestling coach. I realized that was near impossible, that was going to happen. So my next best thing was being going to law school. I really wanted to go to law school.
So you, even as a two-time national champ, world champion,
one of only 7 Americans to win a world championship at the time, yeah, I couldn't even get interviews.
And is that
everybody wanted me as assistant coach, but I couldn't be a head coach.
And do you think it was racially motivated at the time, or what was going on with that process?
Well, if you look at the NCAA, you look at the coaches and who are coaching at the NCAA level, and then you look at the competitors who are competing at the World Olympic Championship, you see a big difference between the participants and the coaches.
So you ended up at Cornell, and you're still kind of coaching at a cursory level, from my understanding, but your big focus is law school.
Yeah, I loved law school, and I was really fortunate that I don't know if they started to pay me like $10,000 a month, $10,000 a year to be a graduate assistant wrestling coach. So that helped out. I mean, I didn't have to borrow too much money to go to law school.
And how much training were you doing at that time?
Oh, I was just I was probably running, weightlifting, doing yoga, just to sort of stay in shape, and then working with the team. But yeah.
You mentioned yoga and meditation a few times, and I don't know how pervasive those things were back then, but how did you get interested in something like yoga?
Well, I went to the University of Iowa, and they had their liberal wing of the universities where the guys who would do yoga and then meditation. So even vegetarianism. So I was really reading up on all of that stuff, and decided to do it. I didn't really implement it till I went to Iowa State, because it was just so much less sort of noise in my life at Iowa State. I was with Willie Gatson, who brought me up there, and Harold Nichols was the head coach at the time, who who really helped me out with respect to focusing on school, but helped me out with wrestling too. So I was lucky to have Harold Nichols and Willie Gatson.
And so it was a change in your lifestyle off the mat as well when you went to Iowa State, it sounds like.
Yes, yeah, it was much more family oriented lifestyle.
And why did you become a vegetarian?
I didn't want to kill animals to eat to live. That was it.
Yeah, I didn't know if there was like a performance benefit, or I was just curious of how you got there.
I mean, there definitely was performance benefit. The funny thing about me, when I went vegetarian, I gained about 5 to 10 pounds. Most people say they lose weight.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. And it's just crazy because, again, back in the early 80s and even the 70s, as you said, when you first encountered at Iowa, it probably wasn't as common as it is now. Now yoga's everywhere, right? And are you still a vegetarian?
I'm a what do they call it? Vegan. No, I don't even eat cheese or milk or anything. Yeah.
Whoa, a next step then.
I got to take B12 vitamins though.
And when you think about meditation, I often think of visualization. Was that something you practice? Kind of putting yourself in those world championship matches?
No. Whenever I tried to do that, my performance was terrible.
Really?
Yeah. The only thing I needed to do is go into the tournament with a clear mind, not worrying about winning or losing, and at that time nobody was going to beat me. So it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't like in most of your life you're worried about losing the match. Nobody's going to beat me. So the focus was on just being able to sort of be here and now, to be totally focused on the here and now. So I would count my breath. I mean, I wasn't doing this any spiritual stuff. I was doing it really to sort of focus my ability to concentrate. And if you can concentrate better than the other guy, that gives you an edge.
Oh, and at that level, every match, I mean, like how many matches did you have to win a world title back in those days?
I think 5. I think
Wow.
It was 5. I think, let me see, in the Olympic trials, I wrestled Eddie Bannock. I wrestled, I just said, Mark Lieberman, John Peterson. I think Mark Schultz was in my weight class. There's a couple other guys, but they weren't within 10 points of me.
Wow.
I didn't wrestle Mark Schultz, though. So I don't know, because Mark was kind of funky, and you never know. For me, I had my hardest times with guys who were really funky.
So so when you came back in, I think 90 was that your first world team back?
Yeah.
So the guy before you at that weight, that was Mark Schultz's weight, that same weight? 90 kg?
98?
Was it 98?
I was at 198 when I came back.
But what I'm saying is, like, at that weight, was Schultz the guy, like, in the 88 Olympics at that weight?
No, he was 180.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, knowing you had
we were 180, and when I made the Olympic team in 80, it was 180. I was in the weight class with all those guys.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, those are legends in there. I mean, that's the mini tournament.
Yeah.
Crazy. And man, we didn't even talk about the NCAA finals with Mark Johnson. I mean, you were Dan Gable's first NCAA champion.
Exactly. I'm really proud of that. Yeah. It's kind of interesting. I really like Mark Johnson. So Mark Johnson beat me in the nationals, but I mean, there can't be a nicer guy in the world than him. And when I was moving back from Iowa State to Iowa, Mark helped me move back in. He picked up a piano, walked up the stairs with it, literally, and I just was stunned.
Dude was so strong. So strong. I freaking love Mark Johnson. He's unbelievable. I just had his compadre on, Jim Heffernan, last week, and they were telling stories about Oregon State and recruiting Les Gutches, and it's like, oof, man, well, that would have been an amazing time to be around that Oregon State program those 2 years they were there.
But that's what I had sort of held back when I think we wrestled Michigan at home my senior year, and I had sort of held back. I didn't go after Mark as hard as I could have, because I didn't want to go into the national tournament undefeated. So I think we tied. And then I think Mark felt bad about his performance at the Nationals, but he really shouldn't have, because I think maybe he thought, well, hey, I'm getting close to this guy now because we tied in my next one. But I mean, it was, I just unloaded on him at the Nationals. It's just, different.
And is it true that at Big Tens he was up a weight and decided to come down?
I didn't hear that. I
Okay.
never heard it. I never.
I didn't know if you had wrestled him at Big Tens.
I would have had to wrestle in the Big Tens, right? You would think.
Well, this is funny you say that, because it just came across my mind. I think back then you could change weights before from the conference to the nationals. And I have a memory in my mind of someone telling me that maybe Mark was up, but if you wrestled him in the duel, that would be very odd to go your weight up at Big Tens and back down for nationals. Either way, though, it's just crazy that that's the guy you wrestled at the junior nationals in high school. Right. And then you wrestle him in the NCAA finals your junior and senior year. And then he comes to Iowa City.
Yeah, he's the coach at Iowa City, yeah.
Crazy. Why did you leave?
We were here together for a year, yeah.
Why did you leave Iowa State to go back to Iowa?
I was demoted from an assistant coach to a graduate assistant coach. And I didn't feel that was warranted, given that I had, won world championships and stuff like that,
Seriously. Wow.
But Harold Nichols, he kind of wanted you to focus on coaching. And I think it's a little bit different now where people understand that, hey, if you win world titles, if you're doing that stuff, that's really, really good for the program. I mean, he lost Gable now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gable went from Iowa State to Iowa because of his mentality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's interesting. So you go back to Iowa City, and then, wow, I'm just your journey is just amazing, because the cool thing to me is that you stepped away, you go to law school, you're totally in on that, but in the back of your mind, you know how dominant you are. And when do you finally start to seriously consider that, hey, I may have another shot at this Olympic dream?
All right. So after law school, I applied for a couple of wrestling coaches jobs. I didn't get any. I can remember applying to Michigan State. And they hired a guy who was a Greco coach, which I just couldn't understand.
Oh, God.
Tried to tell them that. They didn't hear me. And I just thought, how many national titles did they lose for their athletes doing that stuff like that? Not hiring the best person. Anyway, what was the question again?
A question was, when did you seriously start considering a comeback?
Oh, I had got a job. Well, went to law school, graduated. I think went to 87. Had a job in Connecticut, Hartford, Connecticut, which I detest the place. I shouldn't say about somebody may love it. I detest Connecticut. And so then they moved me up to Syracuse, New York, upstate New York, Fayetteville, New York, which I loved. And I was really unhappy at being an attorney. I was just miserable. I loved wrestling. I want to do wrestling. So I was miserable. It was, with respect to depressing, it's probably some of the most depressing times of my life. So then I started to go. So I was running in the morning and weightlifting just to try to feel better. And then I would start to go to the practices at Syracuse University. And they had a young guy there named Mark Kerr, who I started working with, and Gene Mills was the assistant coach there. So I found out that I started wrestling. I was wrestling 3 days a week, wrestled hard 3 days a week. I was weightlifting, running in the morning and weightlifting for lunch in the afternoon. And I was like, I'm at the training level. I'm not getting hurt, because I thought I was getting injured. So then I came out, I think in 89, and I went to the national tournament, and I got second to Jim Shear, couldn't finish a tripod situation. And then at the round robins of the wrestle off, I think, I had beaten Shea pretty easy in the national tournaments, but in the finals, I mean, he just felt like 10 times stronger, just crushed him.
But
So
this is while you're working a
this is
full-time
yeah,
suit job.
yeah. So then in 1990, I had figured out how to defeat the tripod that Jim was doing, and I was ready. I was ready to roll because I was up from I was from 180 to 198. I was ready to roll. I got second in the world that year. I could have hit Karatsev with a move. I was thinking about it, but I later beat him in the following world championships. If I would hit it then, I would be a two-time world champion. But there you go. At least I got one.
Yeah, no, we're gonna get to Hadartsev because that era. And then when you look at later in the '90s with Hadim, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, the great Iranian, they had a great battle. So that way, and then Melvin Douglas comes through. So it's just amazing how many guys were in there, and you were right in the mix, as you said. But so, why do you think you were depressed at the beginning before you started working out and wrestling again? Just that you missed wrestling?
Yeah, it was so boring. I mean, you gotta visualize a life where I'm in a wrestling room doing what I love, right? So that's the whole thing, doing what I love. And for me, helping other kids become national champions or whatever, achieve their goals is to me is very satisfying, especially if you have the knowledge to do it. So I was doing that. And then activity, my body was limber. So and if you're sitting at a desk all day, it's just physically, it's awful to sit in a desk. I do it now with no problem. But at that point, sitting down at the desk was killing me. That's one of the reasons why Iowa State, they demoted me, because I couldn't be in the office. And it wasn't because I didn't want to work on it. It's because my body just felt awful when I was sitting all the time. So anyway.
You didn't even have chairs in your house, right? Back in those days.
That's right. Yeah, we didn't. Yeah. Well, that changed now. Yeah. So
yeah, but I mean, so that kind of went into and I honestly, it happens to a lot of people. It happened to me a little bit. Not I wouldn't say depression, but you get out of college and then you're at your first office job and you're there from 8 to 5, and after your first week, you're like, I got 30 more years of this.
Yeah, exactly. Right? I'm used to traveling around the world, right? Wrestling in different places, doing different events. Now, if someone going to this office, it's terrible, really.
Pushing yourself every day getting better in some way, just like improvement's a fun thing to chase. And when you don't see that, it's challenging. And so once you came back in '90 and you made the world team, did you stop becoming a lawyer for a couple of years and just train full time, or were you doing double duty the whole time?
No, I was doing double duty. I was truly training hard. The funny thing about that, I think it was in 1991, obviously I was second in the world. And I had gone to the World Championship on my vacation time. And then my boss calls me in the office, Chris, I want to talk to you, because they had put it in the Syracuse newspaper. And I thought, okay, this is the end of my wrestling career. And he goes, Chris, well, look, looks like you've got a lot of talent here. And we don't want to get in the way of that. So what we're going to do as a corporation is we're going to sponsor you to compete. And so that was amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they gave me a $20,000 raise. Whenever I go any place, I had a rental car, 5-star hotel room. It's interesting because in 1977 World Championships, we were, I think it was in Switzerland. The organization didn't have any money, so we had to sleep in the barns with the horses. So I went from sleeping in barns with horses to 5-star hotels with rental cars. It was amazing.
Are you serious? Like, yeah. Actual, because Lee Kemp said the same thing. He's like, a lot of people say there was no money in wrestling in the 2000s, in the 90s, and the 80s. He's like, in the 70s, there was literally nothing.
Yeah.
So, wow, that's crazy, because that's not that long of a difference to see that kind of change in terms of some financial support.
Yeah, well, they changed from I think it was a AAA to whatever, USA Wrestling. And then, obviously they got John Dupont as a big donor, brought some money in there, even though it was sort of bad money. But and that whole thing really started to change with the clubs, Art Markatari, with the Sun Kiss Kids and so forth, and Fox Woods, Fox Catchers, whatever they were. They were all paying people to train. So that's when it really started. I mean, if you wrestled in the early 80s, 70s, you did it. I mean, I think had there been financial support for me from like 1977 forward, I won 3 or 4 world championships, easy. But you had to work. You just couldn't do it.
Like if there was like now the RTCs, they have it how it's supposed to be done, and that's why we're seeing the results. So yeah. You on an RTC program, you and Lee Kemp and that gang from that era. Wow, I mean Randy Lewis, that's some skilled wrestlers. Now, when you get back on the scene in '90, there's a whole new crop of guys coming up, and one of them is John Smith, and another is, I don't know if Kevin Jackson had broke on quite at that time. Maybe 92 is his first time, but what's your impression of the new crop of Team USA when you get on that 90 team and guys like John Smith? What are you seeing there?
Well, I mean, I just thought John Smith was just this beautiful wrestler. It was just, to me, it was like I didn't know how to wrestle. After watching him, I was figured out, Jesus, I don't even know how to wrestle. And then if you went and you talk to him and you start talking about his technique and his strategies, then you really knew you didn't know how to wrestle. So I love John Smith, but I didn't like his wrestling style. Guys, it's really low, and it's just, I mean, it took away to me the most exciting parts of wrestling, which I think now would have really been highlighted given mixed martial arts. For example, headlocks, souffles, hip tosses, arm throws, all of that stuff is gone because people are so low now. And when I was wrestling at the time, you had to keep your head up and you had to contact for a while. So, I mean, the styles have changed, but I mean, the technique is beautiful. It's amazing to watch. And we were on world teams and Olympic teams together. I certainly didn't want to be on a team with him because I felt he was our leader.
Wow. And when you think about your technique, you were named, most technical at the 81 Worlds. And you mentioned how John broke down technique. How did you look at technique? Were you someone who got into the finer details of where a finger was placed and where a hand was placed and 3 moves ahead kind of thing?
Yeah, and for the record, I mean, I was selected as the most technically prepared, from my understanding, from the media, the news media at the time that were there. All right. Now, John Smith won it. When he won it, he was selected by the wrestling organization. So his, to my mind, is legitimate. Mine is media, I don't know, but hey, I'll take it.
You're a modest man.
Yeah.
But would you think about technique like that, and you're kind of into
watching
the details?
Films, walk through. I mean, I would literally walk through technique, stop, make sure the head's in the right place, the arms in the right place, nothing's out of place. Really slow stuff that would drive Gable crazy. But this is the kind of thing that Robinson would want to teach, right? And so that's where I got it from. I really got my focus on technique from Jay Robinson.
Yeah, and I was watching that match with Hugh and Kadartsev at the 92 Olympics. Like, even that match, it came down to basically one exchange where he had an inside tie and he was trying to find that far wrist and finally had it. And it's like, that's just such a small battle. And knowing you guys had wrestled before, that had to be someone who you were keying in on. What did you make from just your first impression wrestling him, the great Russian?
Well, I mean, we had a little long story, but at the Olympic Games, they changed the rules from that week from if you get a stall, then you get put down. And so I had never been in a situation where you got put down. I'll say, so when they put me down in the Olympic Games, he just ate me up.
You tried to escape. You almost got out.
But it was over.
And that changed after the Olympic trials 2 months prior to the Olympics, like rule changes.
A week before the Olympics, it's changed, which I always thought was kind of weird. Why change it then? Why don't you go through the whole quad and then other people start up again? But it is what it is. Yeah. That was a major disadvantage to me. But what I should have done, and I look at now, is you've got to constantly change, and you've got to understand that. And when John Smith was in the room showing the wrestling in the low singles, I should have been really focusing on that, because I probably could have got him a couple of times with the low single. Yeah.
Well, when you look at the Kadartsev rivalry. And I look at, your resume and his resume. He's definitely one of the best ever. 7 world and Olympic titles. And then, Rasul Hadim, who he wrestled after that, another great. What stories do you have, or what memories do you have of battling Kadartsev?
Well, I can remember in the World Championships, the first time I wrestled him in 90 in Japan. He's always shooting and shooting and shooting. He's really strong, but I would just front head lock him, and that was that. I think I made one mistake when he shot on me. I tried to spin around him, do a spin around him, and then he sort of raised his arm, pulled over, and took me down. That was a mistake with him. But when I got in there, I felt like when I got my front headlock, usually you roll to the side that you've got the arm on.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like, boy, if I go to the other side, maybe I'll get him because he was so strong. Then in the World Championships in 1991, I got him in a match and I felt the move and I hit it. And then I beat him in the World Championships in 1991. And then I lost to the Cuban before the finals, so it took me out of contention to be in the finals, and Kadartsev ended up winning the World Championships.
Oh, so it was a pool? Like you were in the same pool?
Yeah, I had terrible draws. I mean,
I was going to say,
yeah, Zeke Jones, who he would get these draws that there's like nobody on his side, And I was just the exact opposite. I had Kadartsev, I had the Cuban, I had everybody on my side all the time.
Well, even in 92, it looked like you had Kadartsev first round.
First round, yeah.
It's just like, it doesn't make sense sometimes. And yeah, that's crazy that was the pool. So 90, I was wondering how 91 shook out, because you can't really tell from the UWW website what the bracketing system was at the time. And I know there were some interesting things. I mean, in 92, we all know John Smith lost to Reynoso in the pool, but still went on. So, right. I mean, 92 was a bloodbath. That was a loaded tournament.
Yeah.
What was your experience of like the Olympic experience and kind of opening ceremonies and all that?
I got a picture of me with, let me see, you got a second.
Yeah. There we go.
You recognize these guys?
I see Kenny.
Yeah.
I see KJ.
Then who's that handsome guy in the middle?
That's Chris Campbell in the middle. Man, those guys look young.
Yeah, we're babies, right? But
what a lineup.
I feel blessed to have had the experience. It really was thrilling.
God. So who was that Olympic team in 92? We had Bruce at heavyweight, and then were you next under him? Or was there one?
I think it was Coleman.
Mark Coleman?
Yeah, I think it was Coleman.
Yeah. You and then
and me, and then
Kenny.
And then Saunders, and then I think John Smith and
Kendall. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he went on to win, but he was the baby of that team. And it's funny because I've only interviewed Royce Salger one time, and Royce, if you're listening to this, please come on the podcast. But I was at his house doing an interview for the John Smith documentary I did, and there's a picture of you in his living room right after a practice one day, chiseled to the core. And this must have been like, I think he made the team in 90, so Tokyo. So was Tokyo 90? Yeah. So, but yeah, man, there's that.
That's right. He should have won. He should have won the World Championships in 90. He all he had to do was stall, and it's the one thing he couldn't do, which is just stall. All you have to do is you stall and you win.
Well, he said there was afterwards, the Cubans, everyone had to do a drug test, and they would give the Cubans alcohol so they would pee more, and then the Cubans didn't want to stop drinking, so they wouldn't do the drug test. And he said just quite the situation almost broke out there between the Russians and the Cubans. But he has a ton of stories, as you know. But yeah, just think about the guys on those teams.
Yeah, me and Roy were really good friends. We fought all the time. That was our friendship was based on getting on each other's case all the time.
Like actual fighting?
No. I mean, we love each other. I mean, he's one of my favorite people, but we would fight all the time.
Yeah, I mean, he's a legend, and one of the best personalities in our sport. So
Here's a
once you,
personality.
yes, he is. So once you made it to the Olympics, you have been waiting, for over 12 years. If you think 1980 to 92, long way to get there. You get there, lose in your first match to the Russian, and then you come back for bronze. Where are you at leaving Barcelona? Like, what are you thinking the future holds for you in wrestling at that point?
I wanted to go to another world championships. I felt that I had a chance to win a world championship. But that wasn't in the cards for me. I broke my neck in a car accident probably about 3 or 4 months after that, and that was it.
Oh wow, are you healed up from that now? Is that still cause you issues or?
I'm fused in 4 places, and it's kind of interesting. The doctor said when he first went in, he said, "We're only going to fuse you in one place," but he said your bones were so porous, they were so they had been beaten up so much by wrestling, I think, that they weren't strong, and so they had to fuse me in 4 places. I could I could sort of withstand fusing in one place, but not 4.
Right. And then Melvin went on to win the Worlds that next year. Had you wrestled Melvin before, or was he new on the scene in '93?
We wrestled in the national championship finals, and that's what I first noticed. I couldn't push off of my right arm. It turns out, because I had broken my neck, all my side was gone. And that's when I first really realized that my neck was broken. I lost him in the national finals 1-0, and they costed me 1 point for stepping out of bounds. Nobody takes me down.
I was gonna say every loss is like controversy. There's no
no, nobody's gonna take me down. It's ridiculous, but that's the way it is.
And so you saw wrestling at the highest levels for decades really, 3 decades, and now we're in 2023, and we're at a real pinnacle for USA Wrestling. So when you look at these guys now, the David Taylors, the Jordan Barrows, are you seeing like things that were being done back in your era that could be implemented now that just aren't? Or like, what's your take on kind of the current state of where things are at technique wise and tournament wise on the freestyle scene?
Well, I couldn't talk to him about technique because the technique was so different. I mean, it's really, I guess each period of time is different, and this technique, I don't even understand half of it, right? I mean, I'd have to do a deep dive and work with some guys and maybe get a feel for it. So, I mean,
it's that different, you think?
To me, oh hell yeah, it's incredibly different. I mean, the way I learned, the way I really became successful is that everybody had this idea that they could tire me out, right? So they were going to come after me to tire me out. They're going to tie me up, do all these kinds of things, underhook and so forth and so on. Well, I went to Dan Chandler, who was a Greco coach. I went up to him to train with him for a week. I forget when it was, before the '80 Olympic trials. Harold Nichols paid for that. I went and trained with him. And we learned all the fighting hand techniques. And after that, it was a wrap. Nobody's going to touch me. When they came after me, I was going to arm throw them. I'm going to trip them. I mean, it was a bad thing for them. I just don't have that. I don't have that feel for how I could be really beneficial to. My technique would be beneficial to people at that level, except for a front headlock. I have a mean front headlock, and I think if guys are doing low singles, they're going to run into that front headlock, and that's going to be a problem.
Well, it's interesting because I was just watching some matches of Kale versus Adam Sativ at the Oregon yesterday. And like Kale's a big guy and probably would have been 1 weight class below you during your
same weight class.
Same weight class. So even better comparison. So were guys at that weight going like ankle picks and low ankles like that, like Kale did? Like that was all new.
That's all new.
Yeah. That's all new. Yeah. And then the scrambling is, what are your thoughts on that? Is that evolved as well?
When you say scrambling from once you get to low single?
Once you get to a low single, once you get to any type of single, really, where now a lot of guys start to go from there, especially in folk style, but even freestyle. Yeah, you saw that a little bit with Askren in 08, and it's certainly John once he started getting into his series.
Yeah, it's just really, it's a different focus. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was the so after 90, after the car accident, you retire, and basically now what was the transition like for you at that point? Was it back into to law full time, or did you coach in the 90s?
No, I didn't coach in the 90s. I had I left Carrier Corporation, which is the company that sponsored me. I was doing some labor law in Albertsons because I thought maybe I'd get into the labor law with respect to pro sports, to do some of that. That didn't pan out. But then I got selected. I was involved politically with the Olympic movement. So I was doing a lot of Olympic movement stuff. I was also arbitrator hearing Olympic movement cases on doping and so forth. So I was doing a lot of that stuff with the Olympic Committee. And then I got to travel that way.
So you were on the arbitration committee. That's interesting. I bet you saw a
Well,
lot of,
yeah, and sort of, it's
like, I think of
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was the first African American to ever be the head of an Olympic sport. The boxing athletes got control of their sport for about a year and a half, and they had seen me work with as the elected representative of athletes for all athletes. They'd seen me work there, so they got me as their executive director, what we would call a CEO today. And so that was something I was doing, was a challenge. And it's interesting because, you know, boxing is how would I say it? It's this fatalistic sport. They do everything to hurt themselves. I've never seen people more focused on hurting themselves, diminishing their value, than I have seen boxers do it. It's like that. My whole concept of what a loser has changed. A loser is not a person who can't win. A loser is a person who's winning and decides to do things so he loses. That's what a loser is. And that's my experience that I saw from boxing. They've got some problems with their athletes, and the programs is pretty predatory. So it's not a good deal at all.
It's funny because they say boxing is the sweet science, and a lot of people think of wrestling as like these big brutes, but you kind of see it the opposite, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, so in boxing, every coach basically wants to bring their boxer up to the pros, and they make a lot of money, right? So, for example, if I'm with Jay Robinson says, "Hey, Chris, you go over to Russ Hellickson and ask him to teach you how to do a double leg," you know. So a boxing, well, they won't do that. They won't go out and learn globally. And, you know, Jay was always like, you know, you go, you find a guy what he does do best, and you'll talk to him and beg him to teach you. Most guys will teach you.
Not the case in boxing.
No, the coaches, they get very territorial, and it kills them, and they don't get paid much money, and it was just a bad situation. In fact, it's kind of funny. So I was I was the executive director, or whatever they called it, and and my treasurer, the person I hired as my accountant, had written a $10,000 check to a Russian without letting me know, and so I was freaked out. So I wrote a letter of reprimand to her, and you know, I was very concerned about bribery, and so once I wrote a letter of reprimand to her, the people who were elected wrote a letter of reprimand to me, and I thought at that time, okay, well, look, if this thing goes public and people will realize that if it is in fact, I don't know, it is in fact a $10,000 payment to a Russian to bribe people, then people are going to go to jail. They're going to blame me.
Yeah, they're setting you up.
So I'm getting out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what was the payment for? Did you ever find out?
Nope.
Wow. It's interesting because
they were pissed off and they didn't want me to know.
You probably don't want to know either, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I didn't want to be involved in that for sure.
It's crazy though that you think if any sport you're going to be basically the Rich Bender of you know, that we know now, executive director USA Wrestling. You were that for boxing, which is pretty cool because, you know, I think a lot of people see boxing and wrestling, individual sport, tough competitors. But you said something that was interesting. For a year and a half, boxers got control back. What do you mean by that?
Well, they controlled they had control of the board of directors. The board of directors who hire and fire the athletic directors. So you had athletes who have used to me working with at the Olympic Committee, and so they elected me in. So once their that election cycle changed, we got a whole new board of directors in, and they were really hostile to me. Even though I had brought in the biggest sponsorship contract in history of boxing at the time, I had established a boxing stipend for all the wrestlers, which I think they still have today. So they were paid every month because I did a business plan to determine, hey, these guys are going pro. They're not getting paid much in pro. We can keep them as amateurs if we just give them a little money.
Right.
Then I got approval from the International Federation to do it. And we get it. We got the program going.
Wow, that's cool.
Then they won. Then they went to they had the Goodwill Games, and they were going to do just a week training, and I was like, "Are you crazy?" So I brought them up to the Olympic Training Center, trained them for a month, and then they just killed everybody at the Goodwill Games. They were amazed.
And did you know anything about like boxing skill and technique, or
no? I mean, no, I didn't know about boxing technique, but from Gable, I knew about being in shape. You know what I'm saying? And I knew that you don't go for a big international competition and train for 1 week. That's crazy.
Insane. Yeah. Well, you mentioned Gable certainly had a big impact on you, and Harold Nichols, and you mentioned several others. But one guy I saw in your corner at the '92 games, Dave Schultz. How did that come to be that he was in your corner?
Well, me and Dave were good friends for a long period of time, and I felt that Dave understood my wrestling style, and he had to be in my corner. I believe that if Dave was in my corner at the 1991 World Championships, I would have beaten the Cuban and won a gold medal. He was supposed to be there. They didn't let him there. So then it came to the Olympic Games. And so we were at the Olympic Games, and they came up to me and they go, "Oh, by the way," because Dave was going to be in my corner, "Dave is not going to be in your corner." And I said, "Okay, well, I'm not going to wrestle." Because I really felt that it was very important for him to be in my corner.
Why would they care who's in your corner?
They have this fighting. Everybody wants to be in the corner of Olympic Games, So they have certain coaches, there were 2 or 3, and they didn't want anybody else. But they promised that we'd have who we wanted. At least one coach who you wanted. And there was, and so they came at me with that, and I think they realized that would have been quite a bit of a scandal if I didn't mess up.
Yeah, and so you did end up having David, and you said you felt like he understood your style. Mm-hmm. What kind of a off the mat personal relationship did you have with him?
We were really close friends. We'd go spend Christmas with him all the time. Me, my wife at the time, and my 3 kids. Was that 3 kids at the time, and Dave and Alexander and his daughter. And the families are close even to this day.
Wow.
But I really liked Dave. He was, different kind of person. But yeah, so there are a few people I'm really fond of. I was incredibly fond of.
Is there anyone else in the wrestling world that comes to mind as a major mentor or influence for you that we haven't hit on so far?
Boy, you hate to sort of
leave anyone off.
But Stan Desick, without a doubt. Stan Desick was the world team coach, and I think I went on a tour with Stan Desick. We went to, I think, in Russia, and also to Japan. And on the tour in Russia, he was really upset with us because we weren't serious. And so I had to go apologize to him and say, "Hey, I won't do it again. If you give me a chance, I won't let you down." And so I had learned a lot of technique from Stan, defensive technique, really good stuff. And when I won the World Championship, I was thrilled to share it with him. Yeah.
So he said, when you guys weren't serious, you're staying loose, having a good time, or you guys were?
We were. I mean, we were wrestlers.
Yeah. And it's crazy because you think about all your travels, you saw literally the demise of the Soviet Union during your time. I mean, when you went on some trips in those 90, 91, 92 tours, did you go to any Soviet countries or you?
Well, so the day they collapsed, we were on a trip to Krasnoyarsk, and USA Wrestling canceled the trip. It was me, Kevin Jackson, and a bunch some other guys. And we're like, no, we're going anyway. So we got our tickets done and we flew over there. And Dave was with us too. Me and Dave both won the Krasnoyarsk and the Tbilisi tournament that year. But that was right in the middle of the crash. And so we got, like, as soon as we got there, they gave us these $100 rubles, right? 100 rubles. And like the next day, all of that was no longer good money.
Worthless.
Yeah. So we had sold our jeans and got all these $100 rubles in, and it was worthless.
What is it with the Russian and jeans back then? And everyone says the jeans. They loved it.
We called it the jeans exchange rate, right? You don't bring money to Russia, you bring jeans. You get 100 rubles, 200 rubles. Really.
So was that the Regan tournament you were going to?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So you guys both won it that year.
We won both tournaments, Regan and Tbilisi. Yeah.
Man, that's unbelievable. And the thing you mentioned, I just want to go back to one time is your bronze medal at the 92 Olympics. You had to beat the Cuban who took you out the year before to get to that bronze medal match. Is that right?
Oh yeah, that was a pleasure. Yeah, so I'm wrestling with this guy. It's Roberto Lamata, which I love the guy, but
respect.
No bad feelings at all. But real competitors. And he had beaten me in not the World Cup, the Pan American Games. My grandmother passed away, then I went down to the Pan Am Games, and he had I had slipped on water, and that's how he took me down. It was a close match. And then they had the bands come out, they're playing the band, and they were going around just having a great celebration. So and then in the World Championships the next year, I beat Karatsev. I was on my way to the finals, and he beat me out there. So I definitely had some bad feelings about him. And so we were in the match, and I won 2 sudden death overtime matches at the Olympic Games. One was with him, and I can remember I had a front headlock, and I went to get the far ankle to the front headlock, and I was figuring he's going to kick out. I was going to lose it, so I just held on for dear life. He kicked, but he must have been tired because he didn't kick that hard, and I held it, so I won. And then I looked down at him, and he was like, put his hand to his face, screaming, "No, no!" And I could see, this was his whole life, and he had just lost the most important thing he ever wanted to do. I was so happy. I just overjoyed.
Wow. Especially, I mean, going into it, you're 0-2 against the guy, and your whole chances of medaling depend on you beating him at the highest right. possible stakes.
The worst time he lost at me, the worst time for him. Yeah.
Wow. And so you could just hear that anguish in his voice as soon as
I see it. He was literally put his hand to his face. He was screaming. And I was just loving it.
Wow.
I said something to the effect, "I got you." It was petty. I must say.
Man, when you're in the heat of it like that, though, it's like it's do or die. I mean, literally. I mean, not literally, but pretty close. I mean, the amount of time and effort you put into it, and after just and I guess one of the themes I'm hearing from you is that when you put in 80, when you put in some of these crazy rule changes, it just seems like sometimes things are out of your hands, and it was a lot of jurisdiction and red tape.
Yeah, it was like the world had conspired against me getting the Olympic gold medal, right? It's like they weren't just going to let it happen. I mean, I was lucky to get a medal, really.
Right. Well, Mr. Campbell, you've been so gracious with your time. Thanks for going through some of these moments here. It was just super exciting to get you on the podcast. We always wind down with how did wrestling change your life? But before we get there, were there any stories or takeaways from the sport you wanted to share?
No, I don't think so. All I could say is just sort of the greatest feels I've had in my life was when Jim Gibbons won the national championships and Mark Kerr won the national championships. And I've been working with those guys, obviously. Nate also.
So were you coaching Nate when he was wrestling Kenny?
Yeah. Kenny calls me up today and he says, he always says, if you weren't there, he wouldn't have won all those national titles.
And the craziest part about it was I was just at the national tournament with my brother, and the semifinals were watching Monday Carr, and like
Yeah.
just the chances for those kids to be at the same weight, same age, same skill level, unbelievable.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Nate Carr, it's interesting because in the freestyle scene, he dropped down a weight, right? And Kenny stayed up.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Well, I can't even imagine some of those battles. The last thing I just want to ask you though is, the podcast is called Wrestling Changed My Life. What would you say are some of the biggest lessons or the biggest takeaways you have from great sport of wrestling?
Well, I mean, the one of the biggest is that you either do it or you don't, and so for me, it was like, well, if you want to get something done, you got to pull in the full time. If you don't put in all the time you need, whether it be a law degree, whether it be working for USA Boxing or wrestling, then you're not going to win, and therefore don't feel sorry for yourself. Put the time in, and win or don't.
You either do it or you don't.
Yeah.
And it's up to you. That's the scary part and the freeing part.
Yeah. And I got to travel all around the world. I think I've been to every continent. And that you can't put a price on that.
No, I mean, just any of those spots. I mean, just the life of an international tour. I don't know if you got to go to like Dagestan or Iran or Ossetia, but like those areas or just any of them though would be amazing to see that, especially how wrestling is so highly regarded in some places.
Yeah.
Well, Chris Campbell, thank you very much for your time, sir. I greatly appreciate it. You have nothing but a great day, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Okay, Ryan, you take care.